Have you ever watched a documentary and literally felt panic in your chest, or maybe just this massive wave of relief? Well, let's jump right into this explainer and unpack exactly how filmmakers pull that off. Today, we are breaking down the incredible sensory storytelling behind the documentary concept, The Fragility of Peace, A City Reborn. We're going to look really closely at a 35-scene storyboard treatment that maps out this entirely visceral, emotional journey. It takes us all the way from the quiet, everyday rhythms of life, straight through to devastating destruction, and finally, to the resilient dawn of recovery. What makes this source material so fascinating isn't just the story itself, but how that story is delivered to us through very specific, deliberate visual and auditory cues.
So, how quickly can a city transform from peace to absolute chaos? That profound question is actually the emotional anchor for our whole journey today. How do you visually represent the sheer, terrifying suddenness of a disaster? As we explore how this sequence manipulates light, sound, and pacing to answer that exact question, we're going to see that it's not just about showing big explosions. It's about making you, the viewer, truly feel the psychological whiplash of losing your safety in a matter of literal seconds.
But before we get into the narrative, we really need to establish the documentary's visual style. The source material outlines some strict guidelines here. For instance, the filmmakers chose a 4K resolution, but then intentionally added film grain over it. Now, why do that? Well, pure digital clarity can actually feel a bit artificial to us, but grain? Grain subconsciously tells our brains, hey, this is a gritty, grounded reality. Combine that with volumetric lighting, which is where the light itself almost acts like a character, piercing through fog or smoke to guide how we feel. Add in some dramatic shadows and motion blur, and these techniques guarantee that the story isn't just something you watch, it's something you physically feel.
All right, let's get right into Act 1, the illusion of peace. The whole sequence actually begins by totally lulling us into a false sense of security. We start off in this beautiful, slow-motion calm. You know the vibe: peaceful streets, people just walking normally, kids playing, soft sunlight everywhere. But then, the environment turns on them. The sky slowly turns dark, heavy clouds gather, and the wind kicks up, creating this deep, uneasy feeling as people stop, looking confused in the street. And then, the breaking point. A sudden, massive explosion in the distance. Fire rises, the camera violently shakes, and you just see pure shock register on people's faces. To really shock the viewer, the filmmakers execute this violent pivot in the color palette. Think about it. In one scene, you have these wide, cinematic shots bathed in warm, comforting tones, capturing smiling people in a totally safe environment. Fast forward literally just a few seconds, and that safety is violently swapped out for a harsh, intense orange glow. Buildings are suddenly catching fire, sparks are flying everywhere, and the destruction has officially kicked off. The visual temperature shifts from a comforting warmth to blistering heat.
And that drops us right into Act 2, Sudden Chaos and Destruction. Suddenly, that slow-motion calm we started with is completely gone. We are thrown into this claustrophobic nightmare. The narrative speeds up relentlessly. Thick smoke fills the streets, dropping visibility to almost zero, and dramatic lighting catches the dark silhouettes of people just running in all directions. It's entirely designed to make you feel as lost and as overwhelmed as the people caught in it. To communicate this sheer, overwhelming panic, they drop the smooth, wide panning shots and switch immediately to a shaky camera effect. Psychologically, this triggers our own fight-or-flight response, you know? It makes us feel just as disoriented as the people falling in the streets trying to escape. They start using extreme close-ups of faces completely covered in dust and smoke. And strikingly, they actually bring back slow motion, but this time it's used to highlight families being separated and people crying amidst the absolute panic. It forces us to look directly at the human pain instead of just the Hollywood spectacle.
But amidst all that macro-level destruction, the loud sirens, the sweeping aerial shots of a city on fire, the documentary smartly zooms in on a micro-narrative of human connection. Just a simple, powerful close-up of hands holding tightly, refusing to let go. Even at the absolute peak of the emergency and the chaotic panic, the filmmakers anchor us with this quiet, profound symbol of endurance and humanity. This brings us to Act 3, Aftermath and Human Cost.
As the fires finally burn out, we experience this fascinating trick of sound design. Because actually, absolute silence in a film is often way more jarring to the human brain than a loud explosion. The chaotic noise just suddenly drops off. The deafening blasts, the shouting, the sirens, it's all replaced by an auditory vacuum. Just a heavy, somber silence and fading sounds. It forces you to sit in the quiet and truly process the massive scale of the devastation.
The camera slows right back down to a painful crawl.
To emphasize the sheer scale of the loss and the feeling of isolation, the visuals of the aftermath rely heavily on early morning fog rolling over destroyed buildings and totally empty streets. We get these slow, cinematic pans over burnt vehicles and broken structures. We watch a survivor walking completely alone through the thick, dusty air, while others are desperately calling out the names of their missing loved ones. All that cinematic grandeur we saw earlier is now being used to frame an absolute tragedy.
This scene is really the emotional crux of the whole film. It shows a child sitting alone, looking completely lost, illuminated only by soft light. It's an incredibly heartbreaking moment that masterfully grounds the massive, almost incomprehensible structural destruction of the city into a deeply personal, deeply human tragedy. That soft light is absolutely key here too. It contrasts so sharply with the harsh, broken reality of the child's surroundings.
But even in the absolute darkest moments, there is this beautiful visual pivot. We move from the ultimate image of despair, which is an extreme, dramatic close-up of a tear reflecting the city's fires in a survivor's eye, straight to a quiet, comforting gesture. Just a simple hand placed gently on a shoulder. The physical warmth of human touch begins to cut right through the isolation.
Which perfectly transitions us into Act 4, Hope, Unity, and Rebuilding. From that single act of connection, the visual palette shifts yet again. The heavy darkness and the fog finally begin to lift. That volumetric lighting we talked about at the very beginning, it returns in full force, but now it's used to show the sun slowly rising, piercing right through the dark smoke with these brilliant golden rays of sunlight. The light literally breaks the darkness, visually representing the birth of hope.
The healing process shown here is incredibly methodical. First, workers clear away debris with this slow-motion determination, which is a stark, resilient contrast to the slow-motion panic we saw earlier. Then, neighbors are pulling each other up, showcasing genuine emotional recovery and unity. And eventually, the symbols of the city, like flags, begin to rise again. The narrative visually walks us through the determined, unified steps humanity takes to physically and emotionally rebuild from the ashes.
The sequence closes the loop by bringing us completely full circle. Golden sunlight washes over the ruins, creating an atmosphere that is undeniably tragic, yet somehow peaceful. We see survivors standing together in a wide shot, projecting this incredible silent strength. And then, the final wide shot directly mirrors the opening scenes of the film, but now it's a rebuilt, or at least rebuilding, city at sunrise, fully showcasing the unbreakable strength of those who remained. Finally, the screen fades to black on a simple message. One moment can change everything. Ultimately, this breathtaking storyboard leaves us really reflecting on the fragility of our own daily lives. By meticulously designing the light, the pacing, and the camera work, the filmmakers powerfully remind us of both the terrifying suddenness of loss and the undeniable power of human resilience. It forces us to appreciate just how precious our peaceful moments truly are. Which kind of leaves you to wonder, if your own peace was shattered in an instant, how would you rebuild, and who would be standing next to you when the sun finally rises again?